Hey, my wife bought me these binoculars for Christmas, and it's amazing. She said you can sit on the porch and you can look at the birds. We have these bird feeders, but they're kind of far off. And so that's what I've been doing. And then she said, Mark, I hope the neighbors don't think you're spying on them, because these really are high-powered binoculars. I would never do that. Ooh, but look at what my neighbor's doing right now. I'm joking. I promise. I don't use them to spy on my neighbors, but they're so interesting. I'll even sit on the porch at night sometimes. I'll look at the moon. I'll look at the stars, because they really reach out and help me to see at a great distance. But I tell you, as good as they are, they cannot extend my vision to heaven. For that, we need a different instrument. We need this. We need the Word of God. And in Isaiah chapter 6 today, we're going to get a glimpse into heaven. Isaiah, without the help of binoculars or telescopes, Isaiah is going to see so far that he sees into heaven and sees God himself. This is a very powerful passage. I may just read long portions of it to you, and then we'll outline it and apply it to our lives. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. So Isaiah sees into heaven, and he sees the Lord himself high and exalted. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. Every picture of an angel you've ever seen, the angels had 2 wings, but these seraphim actually had 6 wings. This is the only place in all of the Bible that refers to the seraphim. Some scholars believe that the living creatures in Revelation chapter 4 are also seraphim. So with 2 wings they cover their feet, with 2 they cover their faces, and with 2 of the wings they are able to fly. And the seraphim, verse 3, are calling out to one another, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. I remember back when we used to use hymnals to sing in church. The hymn number 1 was always holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. That's what the seraphims sing. They're worshiping. The scene in heaven is so powerful. Notice in verse 4, the sound of their voices shook. The thresholds and the doorposts shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. And so, if I were to make this a sermon, it would have 3 points. Number 1, Isaiah saw the Lord. Verse 1 says, in the year King Uzziah died. King Uzziah was a very good king. And I'm sure that Isaiah was grieving and distraught. But God reminded him, as good of a king as Uzziah might have been, the king is still on his throne. The King of Kings is on his throne in heaven. And that's important for someone to remember today. No matter what you might feel like you have lost in your life, never ever forget, God is still on his throne. Sometimes we need to get a vision. You don't need binoculars for this. You need the Word of God. We need to see God. And when we see God, excuse me, that's my puppy. When we see God and we see his greatness, then we realize, oh, if God is still on his throne, then God's in control and everything's going to be okay. He saw the Lord. My second point would be this. Isaiah saw himself. Look at verse 5. Woe to me, I cry. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. When you see God in all of his holiness, you see yourself. You see your sin. Hey, Tootsie, come here. You see your sin. And I've never said Tootsie in the middle of a message. When he saw God and lifted up in his holiness, he said, I'm a man of unclean lips. Unclean lips come from an unclean heart. Later, Jesus would say, the mouth speaketh out of that which fills the heart. When he saw the holiness of God, he realized he was unholy. And so he confessed. And in verse 6, one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. And with it he touched my mouth. And he said, see, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for. Our guilt is taken away. Our sin is atoned for because of what Jesus did on the cross. When you see the holiness of God, even when you think you're doing so well, oh, I'm doing great, I can't think of any sins to confess today. If you could see God, you would see yourself differently. And you would see your heart. And it would lead to a place of confession. And point number 3. He saw God, he saw himself, and he saw the need. He saw the need. In verse 8, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here am I. Send me. Now that his heart is clean, and now that he sees the need, he says, here am I, God, send me. Availability. That's the most important thing. God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. Don't wait for someone else to volunteer. God needs us. He needs you, and he needs me. And verse 9, the Lord said, go and tell this people. Go and tell. That sounds real familiar to me. It ought to sound familiar to you. It ought to sound like the Great Commission. It ought to sound like what Jesus told us to do before he ascended into heaven. He said, go and tell. There's someone today who needs to hear about Jesus. And perhaps the person listening to this video needs to be the one who volunteers. Here am I, Lord. Send me.